It was late at night, and the streets were almost empty. The rain had been falling for hours, and the wet ground shone under the dim yellow streetlights. Keanu walked alone, his black coat hanging heavy on his shoulders, the cold air making his breath visible. He had just left a small charity event where he had spoken to a few people, shaken hands, and quietly slipped away. There was nothing glamorous about his walk home. No flashing lights or bodyguards, just a man who preferred peace. Over attention, his head was slightly lowered, not in shame, but in his usual quiet way of moving through the world unseen. He didn't notice the figures watching him from the shadows. From a narrow alley, a group of men stepped out, their laughter low and sharp, their eyes looking for trouble. To them, Keanu was just another stranger walking alone at night. Someone who wouldn't fight back, someone they could mock for sport. They didn't recognize his face, or maybe they didn't care, because two people liked them. Kindness looked like weakness, and they enjoyed testing that. One of them blocked his path, standing too close. The others forming a half-circle around him. The smell of cheap alcohol drifted in the air, the rain pattering harder on the cracked pavement. "Where are you going, old man?" one of them said with a grin. Even though Keanu wasn't old at all, they just wanted to poke, to irritate, to control the moment. Keanu's eyes met theirs for only a second, calm and steady, and that quiet look made them more annoyed, because they expected fear. Instead, they got silence. He didn't answer. He just took a step to the side to walk past. But a shove from behind sent him stumbling forward, his shoulder hitting the cold brick wall. A sharp laugh cut through the rain. They didn't want money. They didn't want anything worth stealing. What they wanted was a reaction. They wanted to see the quiet man crack. But Keanu stayed still, letting the moment pass. His hands relaxed at his sides. One of them grabbed his coat, pulling him toward the open dumpster nearby. The metal lid clanged loudly as it swung back, and without much warning, they pushed him hard, his body hitting the edge before he tumbled in, the smell of old garbage mixing with the smell of rain. It was dark, cramped, and cold inside, water dripping from somewhere above. Their laughter echoed over him as he sat there, not moving. The sound of boots splashing in puddles fading as they walked away. For a few seconds, he stayed in that position, the wet fabric of his coat sticking to his arms, his hair dripping onto his face. The world outside the dumpster felt far away, like another place entirely. He could have shouted. He could have climbed out quickly and run after them, but he didn't. Instead, he breathed in slowly, almost as if calming himself before making a decision. There was no rage in his eyes, no sharp anger, only a quiet understanding that this night had just changed something inside him. Finally, he placed his hands on the metal edge and pulled himself up, his boots slipping slightly before finding balance. He climbed out into the rain again. The street was empty now. The only sound was the steady dripping from rooftops, passing cars. Headlights brushed across his figure before fading into the distance. His coat hung heavy, water pouring off the edges, but he stood still for a moment, staring down the direction they had gone, not because he wanted to chase them, but because he had memorized their faces, every detail, the curve of their grins, the look in their eyes when they thought no one would stop them. With slow, deliberate steps, he began to walk, his pace calm, almost unshaken. The city's cold wind pressed against him, the streetlights casting long shadows at his feet. To any stranger watching from a window, he would have looked like just another man walking home in the rain. But inside him, a plan had already begun forming, not for revenge in the way they would expect, but for something bigger, something they wouldn't see coming. He didn't want to return their cruelty with violence. That would make him just like them. No, his way would be quieter, sharper, and far more lasting. The rain continued to fall, hiding his expression from the few people who crossed his path. A delivery driver unloading boxes looked up for a moment, but Keanu's calm face gave away. Nothing. His mind was already moving ahead, connecting pieces, remembering old promises and old friends who owed him more than they could ever repay. In that moment, the wet streets didn't feel so cold anymore. Because he knew something that they didn't, the ones who had laughed tonight would not be laughing for long. And when the moment came, it wouldn't just be about him. It would be about ending what they had been doing to others for far too long. That night, he reached his quiet apartment, hung his dripping coat on the wall, and stood for a moment, listening to the hum of the city outside. His reflection in the window looked back at him, soaked, tired, but far from defeated. He didn't say a word. Didn't call the police, didn't tell a single soul what had happened, but deep inside, the clock had started ticking, and whether they knew it or not, those men had just invited the wrong kind of storm into their lives. Keanu woke up the next morning with the cold rain still fresh on his clothes and in his mind. But he did not feel angry or bitter. Instead, a quiet strength grew inside him. He went about his day like always, moving with calm and kindness that surprised many people he met at a small street cafe. He bought extra coffee and sandwiches for a group of homeless people sitting nearby, their eyes lighting up as he handed them the food without saying much, just a gentle smile and a nod. For them, Keanu was not a celebrity or a hero. He was simply someone who cared. And that mattered more than any headline. But inside, Keanu's thoughts kept returning to the men in the alley, their cruel laughter echoing faintly in his memory. He knew their faces now, had seen their smug eyes, their careless cruelty, and it stayed with him, not like a wound that would bleed, but like a shadow that reminded him of something important. The city was not safe for many people. And some of those people used power in ways that hurt others quietly, unseen and unchecked. He thought about how those men lived, where they worked, and who protected them. This was not just about a single attack, but about a much bigger problem: corruption, greed, and fear spreading through the streets like a silent poison. People who laughed while others suffered. People who believed they could do anything without facing consequences, and Keanu knew that if he stayed quiet, nothing would change, not just for him, but for everyone who had been hurt or ignored. Despite this, Keanu did not rush into anger or revenge. His nature was different. He believed in justice that came with calm and planning, not shouting or fighting. So he began to reach out quietly to friends he had helped over the years. People who owed him favors not because of his fame, but because of the kindness he had shown when no one was watching. These were lawyers, journalists, and even some former police officers who respected him deeply for his honesty and good heart. He met them in small, quiet places, cafes with soft music and no crowds, offices with papers stacked on desks, and sometimes on phone calls late into the night. Keanu did not demand help or threaten anyone. He simply told the truth, shared what he had seen, and asked for their support to expose the wrongs hidden behind the city's shining buildings. Each conversation added a piece to a puzzle, slowly but surely forming a clearer picture of the corrupt system protecting the men who had attacked him. As he worked behind the scenes, Keanu also made sure to keep helping those in need around him. He believed that true strength came from kindness, and that even while fighting darkness, light must not be forgotten. This balance kept him grounded, gave him purpose beyond personal pain, and reminded those who watched quietly that hope could still live in small acts of love. The city went on with its noise and traffic, people unaware of the quiet storm building in the shadows, but for Keanu, every step was a step closer to something important. He knew that exposing these men would shake things deeply, that powerful people would try to silence the truth, but he also knew that he was not alone. Any more kindness had gathered around him, like a shield stronger than any weapon. He remembered the faces of the homeless he fed that morning, the smile of the barista who gave him extra change without asking, the soft thanks from an old woman on the bus. These small moments became fuel for his mission. A reminder that fighting for justice was about more than punishment. It was about building a world where people like those men would no longer have power to hurt others. At night, when the city lights blurred through his window, Keanu sat quietly, reading news stories, writing notes, and planning the next moves carefully. He never lost sight of what mattered: truth, kindness, and hope. And although no one outside knew the danger he faced, inside, Keanu was ready for what was coming. Calm, patient, and determined to change a broken system not with violence, but with the power of courage and goodness. He did not speak much about the night in the alley. He did not tell his friends or the public what had happened, because for him, it was never about revenge. It was about justice for everyone, and that was a much bigger battle than anyone could see. Yet with every quiet act, Keanu moved closer to making the city safer and fairer, proving that even after being thrown in the trash, a man with kindness and courage could rise higher than anyone expected. Keanu's days passed with quiet purpose, each one blending into the next, but inside, his mind was sharp and focused. He didn't want to rush things, because he knew that patience was a weapon as powerful as any. The city around him buzzed with noise, cars honking, people talking, but Keanu moved like a calm river, steady and unstoppable beneath the surface. He spent his mornings visiting familiar places, where he knew he could find people who believed in doing the right thing. At a small cafe downtown, he met with an old friend who was a lawyer. The lawyer didn't ask many questions. He only listened carefully as Keanu shared what he had learned about the men who had attacked him and their hidden crimes. It was more than just the attack. There were secrets buried deep, lies told to cover up greed and corruption. Keanu also reached out to journalists who had a reputation for telling the truth even when it was dangerous. He knew they could help bring light to the darkness. Over quiet dinners and phone calls late into the night, he passed along documents, stories, and pieces of evidence that were hard to ignore. These journalists began to prepare their investigations, ready to reveal the truth to the public when the time was right. But Keanu didn't want to act alone. He contacted a few former police officers who had left the force because they refused to be part of the corruption. These men were cautious at first, but trusted Keanu because of his steady character and history of kindness. Together, they started planning how to bring down the powerful men who had been hurting the city for years. Even as he built this quiet network of support, Keanu kept up his daily acts of kindness. He would buy food for people living on the streets, visit shelters, and offer a warm word to those who felt forgotten. This was not just about reputation. It was about staying connected to the real world, the real people who were suffering because of the corruption he wanted to end. One afternoon, as he handed a cup of coffee to an elderly homeless man, the man looked up with tired eyes and said softly, "You're one of the good ones." Keanu smiled but didn't say much. Moments like that gave him strength to continue to keep fighting without hate or bitterness. Keanu's plan was not about personal revenge, was about justice, fairness, and hope. He knew that the men who had attacked him were only a small part of a bigger problem. The system around them was broken, and it needed to be fixed. But he also knew that change wouldn't come overnight. It would take time, courage, and the support of people who believed in doing what was right, even when it was hard. As the days went by, Keanu's network grew stronger. More people joined quietly, ready to help expose the truth. Some gave legal advice, others helped gather evidence, and some prepared to share the story with the world. Keanu stayed calm, never rushing, knowing that the right moment to act was coming. At night, he would sit in his small apartment, reading reports and making notes, thinking about the steps ahead. He imagined the faces of those who had been hurt by the corruption, families who lost their homes, workers cheated out of their pay, children who never felt safe. this was why he was doing it. No one outside knew the storm that was growing quietly. Behind the scenes, to the world, Keanu was just a man who had been thrown in a trash bin and walked away. But inside, he was preparing to change everything. One evening, as the city lights flickered through the rain-streaked window, Keanu made a call to an old friend who had helped him years ago during a difficult time. The friend promised to bring others who could help. This was the moment when the quiet plan started to become real. Keanu's strength came not from anger or hatred, but from kindness and patience. He believed that true power was in standing for what was right without losing himself. And though the men who attacked him thought they had won that night, they were wrong. Because sometimes the quietest man can cause the loudest change. One day, the quiet calm that had surrounded Keanu's mission began to break. The city's normal sounds, the hum of traffic, people's footsteps, and distant chatter were suddenly joined by a new, strange noise, the loud, steady thrum of helicopter blades cutting through the air. People on the streets stopped what they were doing and looked up, curious and a little uneasy. A black helicopter, sleek and powerful, flew low over the city. It moved steadily toward the tall glass building where the men who had thrown Keanu into the dumpster worked. The men inside the building were busy with their usual day, unaware that everything was about to change. When they looked out the window and saw the helicopter landing right in front of their offices, their confident smirks began to fade. They did not expect someone like Keanu to come back so boldly, and certainly not with such strength. Keanu stepped out of the helicopter wearing his usual black coat, but this time he was not alone. Around him were serious-looking people in suits, lawyers, journalists, and former police officers, his allies who had been quietly working behind the scenes. Cameras flashed as reporters from various news stations arrived, ready to cover the unfolding story. The men who had attacked Keanu tried to act calm, but the tension in the air was thick. Their faces betrayed fear and surprise as the crowd gathered and security tried to block the entrance. The city was watching now, and these men knew that their time of hiding behind power and lies was ending. Keanu walked directly toward them, his steps confident and steady. He did not yell or scream. His voice was calm but firm as he said, "Remember?" The alley, those words alone made the men freeze. The memory of that cruel night, once locked away, now returned to haunt them in the brightest light. The presence of the helicopter, the crowd, and the cameras made it impossible for the men to escape or hide their guilt. But Keanu's purpose was bigger than just that moment. He revealed to the world the secret documents he had gathered, proof of corruption, greed, and crimes that these men had committed against the people of the city. The documents showed how they had stolen money, bribed officials, and ignored the suffering of innocent families. The attack on Keanu was a small piece of their larger scheme that hurt many more than just one man. News reporters asked questions. Keanu answered clearly, not with anger, but with truth. The city listened, shocked and amazed that a man who had been treated so cruelly had the courage to stand so strong. For the first time, the city saw the faces behind the corruption. No longer were these men untouchable. The helicopter was not just a symbol of power, it was the sign of justice arriving. As the police began to take action, they entered the building with search warrants, looking for more evidence. The men were questioned and their secrets exposed one by one. What had once been hidden in shadows was now brought into the light. For all to see, the city that had ignored the cries of many suddenly had to face the truth. People talked about Keanu's courage and kindness, realizing that real strength did not come from violence or fear, but from standing up for what was right. Keanu did not seek to destroy these men personally. He wanted justice for the city, for the victims, and for the future. The helicopter landing that day was the start of a new chapter. chapter where kindness and truth fought back against cruelty and lies. The men who had laughed at Keanu in the alley now faced a very different reality. Their power was broken, their secrets revealed, and the city was watching closely to make sure justice was done. Keanu stood tall, calm as ever, knowing this was only the beginning. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but he was ready. Because sometimes it is not the loudest voice that wins, but the quiet courage to do what is right. The moment had come. Keanu stood face to face with the men who had thought they could humiliate him and get away with it. The crowd was gathered around them, cameras flashing, microphones pushed close, and the police waiting nearby. The air was thick with tension, but Keanu remained calm. His eyes held a quiet power, steady strength that made the men shrink back. Without raising his voice, Keanu said simply, "Remember the alley." Those words were heavy with meaning. The men exchanged nervous glances, suddenly realizing that the moment they had dismissed as nothing was now the spark that had ignited their downfall. The memory of their cruelty was no longer hidden in the shadows, it was out in the open for all to see. But Keanu was not there just to remind them of one night of cruelty. He stepped forward and opened a folder he held tightly. Inside were documents, photographs, and recordings, proof of the corruption and lies the men had hidden for years. These papers showed how they had stolen money meant for city projects, bribed officials to keep their crimes secret, and ignored the suffering of families and workers. The attack on Keanu was just a small piece of a much bigger puzzle. It was their way of trying to silence anyone who might expose them. But now, with the evidence in hand and the city watching, they could no longer hide behind their power. The men tried to speak, to deny the accusations, but their words faltered under the weight of truth. The crowd's murmurs grew louder as reporters asked questions. Keanu answered each calmly, without anger or hatred, but with clear and firm facts. His calmness made the crowd believe in him even more. For the first time, the city saw the faces behind the corruption clearly. These men who had once been untouchable were now exposed and vulnerable. The helicopter that had brought Keanu was not just a symbol of arrival. It was a symbol of justice. Police officers stepped forward with warrants and began to search the men's offices and homes. They found more proof ledgers filled with illegal transactions, emails revealing secret deals, and even hidden recordings of conversations that confirmed the crimes. Each piece of evidence tightened the case against the men. While the men's world collapsed, Keanu stayed composed. He did not seek revenge or celebrate their defeat. Instead, he spoke about fairness and the need for healing in the city. He reminded everyone that justice was not about punishment alone, but about building a better future. Many who had suffered under the men's corruption came forward, sharing their stories and hopes for change. The city began to believe that things could be different, that kindness and truth could win over greed and cruelty. Keanu's courage inspired others to stand up as well. People realized that even the quietest voices could be loud enough to bring change if they stood together. The men who had once laughed at Keanu now faced serious charges. Their power was broken, and they would have to answer for their crimes. In court, the city watched closely, hoping that this time justice would be real and lasting. Even as the case moved forward, Keanu continued his quiet work, helping those hurt by the corruption and encouraging kindness in small ways. He knew the fight was far from over, but this day marked a turning point, a moment when truth and courage showed their power in the end. Keanu's simple words and quiet actions reminded everyone that sometimes the strongest people are those who face cruelty with calm strength and seek justice without hatred. The city buzzed with news like never before. Stories about the men who had attacked Keanu and their crimes filled the newspapers, radio shows, and television broadcasts. Everyone wanted to know more, the quiet man who had been thrown in the trash had become a symbol of courage and justice. Inside the police station, the investigation grew deeper. Officers worked day and night, following every lead, checking every detail. They searched the offices, homes, and secret places where the corrupt men had hidden their dirty work. Files were uncovered, emails decrypted, and bank accounts traced. The more they found, the clearer the picture became. A vast network of lies and greed had been operating for years. The men, who had once ruled with fear, were now trapped by the truth. Their confident smiles were gone, replaced by worry and desperation. Their lawyers tried to defend them, but the evidence was too strong. And the people who had suffered stepped forward to tell their stories. Families who had lost homes, workers who had not been paid, and others who had been silenced now spoke openly, encouraged by the city's new hope. The news cameras followed every step. Each arrest was broadcast live, showing the men being led away in handcuffs, the city's streets filled with whispers and sometimes cheers. People who had felt powerless saw that change was possible, that justice could reach even the most hidden corners. Despite the excitement, Keanu remained calm and humble. He did not seek fame or glory. Instead, he focused on helping those affected by the corruption. He worked with charities and community groups to provide support for families and rebuild trust in the city's leaders. The city began to heal slowly. New leaders stepped forward, promising transparency and fairness. Laws were reviewed, and new rules were made to prevent such corruption from growing again. People felt safer, and the air seemed lighter. But Keanu knew the fight was not over. Corruption had deep roots, and others might try to take the place of those who had fallen. That was why he continued his work quietly, watching, listening, and helping wherever he could. The men's trial became a turning point. Public attention remained high, and the court carefully examined every piece of evidence. The truth came out in full. Their crimes were undeniable. The judge delivered strong sentences, sending a message that no one was above the law. Keanu's role in the story inspired others across the country. People began to believe in the power of kindness and courage. They saw that even a quiet man, thrown into the trash, could rise and make a difference in the years that followed. Keanu continued his work not just as a symbol, but as a real force for good. He helped build programs for youth, supported families in need, and reminded the city that true power came from standing up for others. The city never forgot that dark night in the alley. But it also never forgot the man who turned that cruelty into a victory for everyone. Keanu never wanted to destroy those men completely. Even though they had hurt many people and himself, he believed in justice with mercy. After the men were arrested and their crimes exposed, Keanu used his influence to make sure they faced the law fairly, but also that they had a chance to change and make things right. He worked quietly with lawyers and community leaders to find ways for part of the money taken by the corrupt men to be used for good. Instead of letting the stolen money disappear into the city's dark corners, Keanu helped arrange for it to be returned to the people it had hurt the most. Charities for families, shelters for the homeless, and programs for children all received support. Keanu believed that kindness was stronger than anger. He knew that if he acted with hatred, he would become like those who had hurt him. Instead, he chose to show that real strength came from forgiveness and helping others heal. Many people in the city were surprised by this. They expected Keanu to demand harsh punishment or seek revenge. But his actions showed a different kind of courage, the courage to give hope even to those who had done wrong. This act of kindness sent a powerful message. It showed that justice was not just about punishment, but also about rebuilding trust and healing communities. It inspired people to believe that change was possible, even after years of pain and corruption. Keanu continued to support those affected by the corruption in many ways. He visited shelters, helped organize food drives, and worked with volunteers to bring smiles to children who had known too much hardship. His kindness spread like a quiet light in the city's darkest places. At the same time, he encouraged others to stand up for what was right. He spoke to youth groups about courage and kindness, reminding them that even small acts could make a big difference. His story became a beacon of hope for many. Though the men who had hurt him were now behind bars, Keanu did not hate them. He believed that everyone could change if given the right chance. This belief made him different from many others and helped heal the city's wounds faster. People started to see Keanu not just as a man who survived cruelty, but as a true leader who showed strength through compassion. His actions changed how justice was viewed in the city and beyond. The stolen money, once a symbol of greed, became a tool for good thanks to Keanu's efforts. Families who had lost hope found new support, and communities began to grow stronger. This was the real victory, not in punishment alone, but in kindness that brought people together and made the city a better place for everyone. After everything had settled, Keanu knew it was time to leave the city behind. He had done what he came to do: expose the truth, help bring justice, and begin healing the wounds left by years of corruption. But he never wanted the attention or the fame that came with the story. His work was done quietly, and so he planned his departure the same way. The day he left, the city seemed different. People walked the streets with lighter steps. Children played where once there was fear, and the air felt cleaner, as if a dark cloud had finally lifted. The news still talked about Keanu's courage and kindness, but he stayed away from the spotlight. He packed his bag simply, with no grand goodbye or speeches. His black coat, the same one he wore the night he was thrown in the trash, hung ready. He didn't carry anger or bitterness, only a deep sense of peace and hope for the future. At the helicopter landing pad, a small group of children waited quietly. They had heard the stories and wanted to see the man who had changed their city. Keanu smiled warmly and waved at them, his heart full. These simple moments, the smiles and hope in their eyes, were what made everything worth it. As the helicopter rose into the sky, Keanu looked down at the city below, the place where he had been hurt, but also where he had helped start something new. The wind lifted his coat, and for a moment he felt free, ready for whatever came next. No interviews followed. No crowds shouted his name. Instead, there was only silence, and in that silence, a powerful message. Sometimes true strength is quiet, humble, and unseen by many. The men who had once mocked him in the alley would remember him not as a victim, but as a force of change. A man who chose kindness over revenge, truth over fear, and courage over silence. And the city, forever changed by his actions, would carry that story forward. A story of hope, justice, and the quiet power of one man who refused to be broken.